Previously on the Backside of Water podcast.
I present to you the storage facility for the mini-stage props used in the Magic Eye Theater productions here at Disneyland.
Oh, wait a second. No way. Freddy, is that?
Yes, it is. The SEA emblem. Our last two SEA adventures ended with our new friend, Henry Muntz, the grandson of famed and elusive SEA archivist Richard Quatermain Muntz, diving off of Schweitzer Falls to his death in order to prevent the sinister Disney black marketeer Felix Casablanca from getting the third key that was needed to unlock the priceless book that holds all of the secrets of the SEA.
Oh, no way. Henry Muntz?
Can you believe it? He's alive!
In the flesh, how are you guys?
I don't believe my eyes. We thought you were a goner.
Well, with all due respect, it was kind of the plan.
The Breath of Zephyrus. You see, the three relics is an SEA tall tale that many believe to be just myth. That is, until the discovery of this vase.
Oh, Victor, I don't understand. What are you talking about?
Come now, Henry. Don't make me spell it out for you.
Oh, I see. Casablanca got to you, didn't he?
Now that I have the third key, and the first location to these three relics you've spoken about, what need do I have for you three? Goodbye, gentlemen.
It's Adventureland Day. The event pulls in people from around the globe. We climb up on land here and find a ride to Tokyo Disney Sea with a willing Adventureland Dayer.
Well, guys, what are we waiting for? Off to Adventureland Day.
Off to Adventureland Day! Woohoo!
Come on, Alex Stewart. We can't let him get away with the Breath of Zephyrus.
I'm right behind you, Freddy Martin. I can't believe that Casablanca was able to inhale some of that stuff. That can't be good for your lungs.
I doubt he has anything to worry about in that regard. If you remember, the Breath of Zephyrus grants those who breathe in its effervescence long life.
Don't remind me, Henry Muntz.
Well, once we catch him, he'll be living the length of those days behind bars. Oh, they just stuck behind that pagoda.
That's a dead end. We've got him now. Stop right there, Casablanca.
Yeah, there's nowhere left to run. Hand over the Breath of Zephyrus and maybe you'll have a fighting chance of getting a cell with a window. It must be nice to be that deluded, thinking you finally caught the one and only Felix Casablanca.
Not sure we're the deluded ones, Felix. Your back is the one that is literally against a wall.
Yeah, you know what they say. Whenever you find your back against the wall, take a chopper instead.
What?
I've never heard such a dumb phrase. Oh, guys, look.
A helicopter.
Just what we need.
I wish I could stay and chat, but I've got eternal life waiting for me. Arrivederci.
Great, he's getting away again!
Not if I have anything to say about it. Here, Freddy, hold my bag.
Henry, what are you doing?
Something I should have done a long time ago. I'll see you too soon.
Henry!
Wait for me at the Imaginarium.
Look, Freddy, he's
jumping onto the landing gear of the helo.
And neither Casablanca nor the pilots have any clue about it.
Henry Muntz, you old scoundrel.
Go get that breath, pal.
Well, this is awkward.
Yeah, it is. I mean, now that Casablanca's gone, along with Henry, where do we go from here, Freddy? The trail is about as cold as a churro on the floor of a doom buggy after the park closes.
True enough, but unlike last time we parted ways with Henry, at least we have a rendezvous point.
Oh, that's right. He told us to meet him back at the Imaginarium.
And that's exactly what we're going to do.
But we have no clue when we're going to see him next. What will we do while we're waiting for him?
I have an idea. Why don't we explore some of the rich history, awesome stories, and fascinating details behind our favorite Disney attractions? I mean, that's what we do on our show, after all.
Ooh, it's been a while since we've done that. That's a great idea. Freddy, to the Imaginarium Studios! Hello and welcome to another episode of The Backside of Water, a podcast that delves into the rich history, awesome stories, and fascinating details behind your favorite Disney attractions. I'm Alex Stewart.
I'm Freddy Martin.
And I'm Annie Ruygt.
Oh, Annie, it is so great to hear your voice again.
Thanks, Al. It's so great to be here at the Imaginarium Studios recording with you guys for what seems like, the first time.
Oh, it really does feel that way, but I'm sure we're going to fall right back into our old groove in no time.
No doubt. And you've joined us for an episode that is near and dear to our hearts. That's right, this episode is covering the rich and storied history of Buzz Lightyear's Astro Blasters.
An attraction that is truly out of this world.
You said it, Andrea. So without any further ado, let's blast off and explore the distant reaches of the Toy Story galaxy.
Buzz Lightyear Astro Blasters is yet another attraction whose origins first lie within the walls of Disneyland's younger, but much bigger brother, the Magic Kingdom down in Walt Disney World.
But in order to truly grasp the impact of Buzz Lightyear's first introduction into the berm at Disneyland, we need to travel back even further than the opening of the Florida version of the attraction, all the way back to 1955, the same year that Walt Disney would open the doors of Disneyland. Over on the East Coast, a guy by the name of Alexander Schur would open something called the New York Institute of Technology. The school was designed to cater to the underprivileged who may not be able to afford a traditional college education. Quickly after opening, Schur noticed an interesting trend within the student population at his school: low math scores. Being that many of his students didn't have a strong formal educational background, he decided to try to make the learning more accessible, more fun. So Schur, being an educational genius without knowing it, decided that he would convert his math lessons into comics that his students could read. He hired a comic cartoonist and got to work. These lessons were an absolute hit with his students, but Schur, like any talented creative, didn't want to stop with this one successful project. He decided that he would turn these comics into an animated short film series, and that's exactly what he did.
Schur's animated educational films went on to win an award in the New York International TV Film Festival, which would then cause him to catch the animation bug. Ooh, I love animation. Schur once again decided to go bigger, this time with a feature-length animated film by the name of Tubby the Tuba. He hired some of the era's best animators for the project, but quickly found the slow and tedious processes of hand animating to be really untenable. This problem sparked inspiration within Schur. He devised a plan to use the computers at his New York Institute of Technology to animate the film for him. The problem was, Schur wasn't great with computers himself, so he ended up hiring a number of computer scientists to help him with the project. In this mass hiring, Schur would employ a group of young computer engineers by the name of Edwin Catmull, Malcolm Blanchard, Alvy Ray Smith, and David DiFrancesco. These four men would take up residency in a converted old garage and start working on producing Tubby the Tuba via computer technology.
The problem was, there were tons of problems. Computers, being in their relative infancy at this point, were simply not capable of doing the work Schur needed to make what he thought was his masterpiece of Tubby the Tuba. Catmull and company began to see the limitations of the technology and grew more and more hesitant with staying on to produce the film for fear it would be a flop. Schur would eventually turn to traditional animation methods for his film, which would then go on to be an utter box office flop. But the staff of Computer Graphics Lab, as Schur's company would be called, caught a glimpse of what computers were capable of. The problem was, the technology Alexander Schur was offering them was simply not enough to achieve their dreams of creating films with computer technology.
This group of techno trailblazers needed the tools and resources that only a film studio could provide. So, behind Schur's back, Catmull and the others working for Computer Graphics Lab would start researching for a new place to call home. They would find their new home under the wing of Star Wars creator George Lucas. The team was compelled to work with Lucas after he had given an in-depth presentation with fellow filmmaker Francis Ford Coppola that computer graphics lab employee Alvy Ray Smith was in attendance of. 6 of the computer graphics team would slowly migrate to working with Lucas over a year's time, trying to make the migration as inconspicuous to their former boss as possible. This team would eventually create the Computer Graphics Division of Lucasfilm in 1979. Ed Catmull, being the first hire to his new division, would become its leader as well. During their time with Lucasfilm, Catmull and his crew would work on developing a computer graphics rendering software, which would essentially take all the raw data that computer graphics artists work with and polish it up, then prepare it into something more elegant and pleasing for a viewer in film or television.
The problem was, computer graphics technology was so new that it was pretty much impossible to sell the software. Catmull and his team figured that the best way to sell the technology would be to showcase it in action. So, they brought on a talented animator that had just been let go by Disney by the name of John Lasseter. He was to come in and create a short, digitally animated piece using computer-generated imagery technologies created by the Lucasfilm team, and then rendering it all using their rendering software. This short would be called The Adventures of Andre and Wally B. It was a simple film that showcased Lasseter's talent for storytelling and animation with digital technology. I just watched this film, and it's super cute, super short, and, loaded with that Tom and Jerry violence that everybody loves to go after, especially in the early days of animation. Eventually, Catmull's team would create an entire computer system designed specifically to create cutting-edge digital effects that they originally were going to call the Picture Maker. This name was clearly not super catchy and failed to stand out, so it was back to the drawing board. Alvy Ray Smith would eventually throw out the name Pixar, believing it to have that more iconic sound to it, and after a few passes around with the team, it would be changed finally to the Pixar Imaging Computer. The team would start using the Pixar computer to create iconic and groundbreaking digital special effects for films like The Wrath of Khan and an amazing piece of digital mastery in the film Young Sherlock Holmes. I love that movie. The Lucasfilm graphics team was becoming one of the hottest commodities in Hollywood in the early 1980s, but sadly, nothing good lasts.
In 1983, George Lucas would be facing a tumultuous and costly divorce. This paired with the waning revenue from his hit film Return of the Jedi, and began to make the team in the Lucasfilm graphics department believe they may be facing a selling of the division to cover Lucas' costs. A threat like this could mean that all the progress and momentum the team had been enjoying could be halted, or worse, shut down. They needed to come up with a plan, and fast. During this time, a man by the name of Nolan Bushnell, creator of the Chuck E. Cheese restaurant chain, was getting into the computer animation game as well.
Wait a minute, Annie, did I hear you correctly? The guy who created Chuck E. Cheese was getting into animation? That has to be a story made up within some sort of pizza-addled mind. Where did you hear this? I've got the pizza sweats.
It sounds crazy, I know. It sounds like a bunch of pepperoni to me, but very much. It's true. And it makes sense when you understand that Chuck E. Cheese was actually Bushnell's second career. His first career was the founding of a very different type of endeavor.
Wait, hold on. That name sounds familiar. Nolan Bushnell. Wait, that's not the guy who founded the video company Atari, is it?
It is indeed.
Whoa! Wait, so you're telling me the guy who got me into video gaming when I was young also fueled my nightmares by creating giant animatronic pizza-addicted mice?
Yep, that's correct.
That is almost too much for my brain to comprehend at this point.
Just wait, it gets much, much better, you guys. Bushnell decided he wanted to grow his pizza empire by adding animation to the mix. So he started an entire animation unit called Cadabroscope. Sadly, they would only make one piece, an animated Christmas special for NBC called Chuck E. Cheese, the Christmas that almost wasn't. By this time, the video game crash of the early 1980s would affect Bushnell's bottom line severely, and he would be forced to sell off a bunch of assets to stay afloat. One of these assets was Cadabroscope, and the buyer would be Lucasfilm.
Honestly, the story up to this point sounds utterly made up. It sounds like somebody who's had way too much sugar and caffeine, and they're just spitballing by grabbing all of these things together. George Lucas, Chuck E. Cheese, Atari. Let's put it all together.
Yeah, it sounds like a 12-year-old made up this story.
This is a Chuck E. Cheese pizza with everything on it.
Oh my gosh. Hey, way to go. Way to go, Freddy. And I'll take
Thank
a
you.
slice, buddy. So even though George Lucas was trying to sell this company, he actually acquired Cadabroscope because he felt that it would help raise the overall value that Pixar had to offer. And it was during this period in the company's history that Lucas would be approached by the one and only Steve Jobs to buy the struggling software company. Jobs himself had just been ousted as the head of his company, Apple, and his newest venture, Next Computers, was in a steep decline into oblivion as well. Jobs' offer was much lower than Lucas was willing to take, so at that time, Lucas declined. It wasn't until Ed Catmull and Alvy Ray Smith had been declined 45 times by various venture capitalists and large corporate firms that George Lucas decided to finally accept Steve Jobs' lowball offer. In February of 1986, Steve Jobs would pay George Lucas $5 million for the technology rights. He would also invest $5 million into the company as a whole. He would also join the board of directors as chairman. Around this time, Pixar finally caught a break, though. Walt Disney Studios would buy a Pixar image computer and some custom animation software written by the Pixar team to use during their process of converting from the labor-intensive 2D animation method into something that was more automated for 1990's The Rescuers Down Under.
But Pixar wasn't out of the woods yet, and Pixar continued to struggle. The company would bleed money as it had door after door slammed in its face as they attempted to sell their computer tech to studios. Throughout this time, Steve Jobs would keep the company afloat by continuing to contribute money from his own coffers to keep the lights on. Eventually, Jobs would hit the $50 million mark of investing money, which would make him the majority owner of Pixar and gave him control over the entire company. And this is where Pixar's story truly gets exciting. With Jobs in charge, he would make a hugely risky decision and choose to shift full focus away from the sales of the hard and software and instead focus on the small animation department led by the immensely ambitious John Lasseter. At this point, Jobs believed the best way to sell their hard goods was to show the world what it could do, and Lasseter and his crew were doing just that by producing commercials for outside companies as a way to continue keeping Pixar alive. But Jobs wasn't just satisfied with commercials. He and Lasseter had a shared vision of creating an entire feature-length film that was 100% animated by computers. Jobs was so impressed by Lasseter's shared visions that he decided to focus all of Pixar's attention on the creative powers of Lasseter and his team.
Jobs believed so wholeheartedly in this vision that he would eventually become consumed by the prospect of creating a feature-length computer animated film. Jobs was so committed that he ended up selling the entire hardware division of the company to focus solely on creating. It was fortuitous that Pixar had secured a very strong relationship with Walt Disney Feature Animation during this time too, through the use of the Pixar image computer we talked about earlier. In fact, Steve Jobs would secure a $26 million 3-film deal with then Disney CEO Michael Eisner. Everyone at Pixar was over the moon and in over their heads. A feature-length computer animated film had simply never been attempted before. The shorts Pixar were making for its commercial clients were difficult, labor-intensive, and extremely stressful. But this didn't deter Jobs, Catmull, and especially Lasseter. The Pixar creative team, headed by John Lasseter, would meet with Disney's creative executives, led by animation juggernaut Jeffrey Katzenberg. It was Katzenberg's leadership that single-handedly brought Disney animation from the throes of a premature death to its most exciting time in history, known as the Disney Renaissance.
And Katzenberg had a formula for these hit films like The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, and The Lion King. In fact, he believed so much in the formula ingredients that he imparted these things to Lasseter and his crew when creating their computer animation project. This formula included things like edgy, rebellious characters, crass, borderline provocative humor, and lots of great songs to sing along to. After all, what was a Disney movie without great songs to sing along to? Lasseter and his team would take this advice and get to work on their story. This story would hinge on an idea brought forth by a childhood fantasy that Lasseter had about toys that would come to life when no one was around. The problem was, that was as far as the story ever went. But with Katzenberg's winning formulaic ideas in hand, Lasseter was sure they could come up with something from this seed of an idea. They went to work developing a story around a little one-man band tin toy named Tinny and a large stuffed ventriloquist dummy named Woody. As it sounds to anyone else listening to that idea, it was scrapped quickly because of the creepy factor. A creepy factor of like 50. Ventriloquist dolls, not good.
Yeah,
not
no one
good.
likes those.
Which I think is, in a digression here, I think it's really interesting that in Toy Story 4, what do they bring back? The ventriloquist dummy.
Yes,
Yep.
they do.
That is totally a reference to early Toy Story days. Which
They were
I
just
think is
waiting
great. So,
to squeeze that in. Someone
Exactly,
was so
they're like,
into
one
the
day.
ventriloquist dummy.
one day we want to use that horror. The horror. So, I mean, we all know that nothing is less lovable than a ventriloquist dummy. It's tongue-tying me. I'm so nervous. Instead, the story would evolve into one led by a lovable old cowboy doll named Woody and a hilariously aloof space ranger named Buzz Lightyear, an homage to one of the first men to walk on the moon back in 1969 by the name of Buzz Aldrin.
Oh, I guess I never put that together.
That's
but,
really cool. Yeah, I never knew that.
Yeah. Even though these characters were less creepy than the originals, they weren't any more lovable. In fact, Jeffrey Katzenberg's notes led the Pixar team to make Woody a crass, sarcastic, and edgy character, something that neither Lasseter nor the rest of the team could relate to. But who were they to argue with the man who sparked the Disney Renaissance? The time came for them to premiere a new preliminary animation reels for Katzenberg and the crew, and when they did, it was an unmitigated disaster. The characters were prickly, the story was nonsensical, and the message of the story was convoluted beyond measure. Katzenberg also made notes that the story, despite their uncomfortable efforts, was still not edgy enough. It was back to the writing board for Lasseter and his team, but as the story sessions progressed, the story kept getting further and further away from what they had originally set out to do. After a few more failed animation reel meetings with Katzenberg, things weren't looking good for Pixar. And Steve Jobs was feeling it. Though he had originally believed wholeheartedly in the vision for Pixar as a production company, the current trajectory of the company had him worried. Did he put too much stock into the story team's skills? Did he put too much faith in Lasseter? During this time of doubt, Jobs would quietly attempt to sell the company to the likes of Hallmark Cards and some thought leaders in the tech world. It seemed at this point as though Pixar was going to burn out before its light could even be seen.
It was only after yet another failed story session that Lasseter made an executive decision. They would no longer be taking any notes from Disney on how to make the film. Instead, they would go with what their gut told them. And thank goodness they did. Lasseter would go on to almost wholly revamp the story from ground up, weaving a story that was both humorous and heartfelt. He took the edge off and replaced it with sincerity. He made the characters likable and dynamic. In essence, he took what Jeffrey Katzenberg told him and did the opposite. And it seemed like for the first time in a long time that Pixar had once again found its voice. Lasseter would premiere the final story reels to Katzenberg and the rest of the Disney execs, who decided that they would greenlight the project and distribute the film during the 1995 holiday season. This news brought life back to the failing studio and gave Jobs the boost he needed to decide to keep the company instead of trying to pawn it off.
Pixar would release the first fully computer-animated feature film the world would ever see on November 19, 1995. It was a critical and box office success. The influence of Toy Story would quite literally change the way the world told stories. Every major animation studio in the world would eventually make the shift to fully computer-animated films over just the next couple of years in an attempt to compete with the visual wonders created by the team at Pixar. The company would go on to make billions of dollars in revenue, making Steve Jobs even richer than he already was. Pixar would go on to create some of the most beloved characters of the last 50 years, all of whom would populate the hearts of viewers young and old, as well as toy shelves, lunchboxes, t-shirts, and backpacks the world round.
I have some of those toys. Pixar's influence wouldn't just stop with the movies and merchandising. Audiences were clamoring to step into the world that John Lasseter and Pixar had created, and Disney Imagineers obliged. They needed an attraction that would accomplish many things the original Toy Story film did. They needed an attraction that was both classic yet felt new and refreshing. They needed something that was engaging and innovative. And they needed something that could be enjoyed by audiences young and old. It was finally settled that the first Pixar-themed ride in Disney parks would be a dark ride, and it would feature the beloved character Buzz Lightyear. And what better place to feature this attraction than in Tomorrowland?
Real quick, one thing that I want us to focus on, at least at this point, is all of these ideas were first started in Disney World. So the attraction first appeared in Disney World, and it was successful in Disney World, and then they tried to find a place to move it in Tomorrowland. And Tomorrowland not having a lot of real estate, it was kind of difficult for them to find a spot. And Freddy, where did they eventually end up making a spot for Buzz Lightyear's Astro Blasters?
Well, have you ever heard of the Circarama?
Circahuma?
Circarama? The Circarama was a theater in Tomorrowland. It eventually became Circle Vision. It's where they showed the beautiful film, a 360-degree film, which made old people want to sit down and young people want to throw up. It's actually a very beautiful thing. You can still see it on display, the same technology at the China Pavilion in Epcot and the Canada Pavilion in Epcot. But it was this big round room that was a great place to get in and out of the air condition. And that big, wonderful room wasn't in use anymore. If you wanted to back out from when Buzz Lightyear got there, right there at the corner at the entry to Tomorrowland, if we back up a little bit, we can go back to the 1998 New Tomorrowland, where the rocket rods were zooming around on the old People Mover tracks. And the rocket rods queue started at the same place the Buzz Lightyear queue starts today. Do you guys ever remember going into the... I don't think either of you got to go on rocket rods, right?
Oh, I did.
I
loved
it.
it.
You did?
I didn't do it.
It was one of my favorite
You
rides.
loved it, Annie?
Oh, I loved it. It was so fast and so fun.
So fast and so furious, would you say?
What'd you say? And furious? Oh, no. I automatically tried to block that out.
It's all about family, Annie. It's all about the family.
Well, yeah, so that's where the queue...
Did you know that the rocket rods actually ran off of Vin Diesel fuel?
Okay. That was pretty good.
That was pretty good.
It was good.
Not too shabby, Gabby.
I do remember, though, the rocket rods broke down all the time, so it was rare that you could ride them.
Yeah, and it only lasted, what, a year and a half?
Yeah, they were open for just a very short period, right?
As I recall. So that entry that we walk into today, into the Buzz Lightyear Astro Blasters, was the entry into the old rocket rods. What was really cool at that time when rocket rods was there is it was they used the Circle Vision Theater as part of the queue. So there was a bunch of zigzagging back and forth inside that room, and then they played Circle Vision films similar to Circle Vision films, just their safety films were all around you in the Circle Vision place.
Awesome.
But also very cool was they showed off a lot of the old original 1955 and 1964 Tomorrowland vehicles, and they were in there. They were painted all neon. So you were in and around the different technologies over the years, and basically saying that the rocket rods is That new one. And interestingly enough, they took you downstairs to a tunnel and back up into the rocket rods. But that's another episode back when we talked about the People Mover.
Disney Underground.
Disney Underground. Well, but so that was before Buzz Lightyear, and before that, it was the Circorama Theater or the Circle Vision Theater. And that's what we walk into every time we go to defeat Zurg.
Which is
Buzz
awesome.
Lightyear's Astro Blasters.
Well, and when you look at it, it really is, there's not a lot of real estate in Tomorrowland. You don't have, 90% of Tomorrowland is taken up by Autopia and Space Mountain.
Yeah.
And then you had Star Tours that was already very well established. And so they had to find and make do with something. And it was this empty space that they decided to use, which is pretty crazy to me.
Yeah, big empty room. Well, and that's what attractions builders, Imagineers, they're looking for, a big chunk of space that they can do a lot with. And when I say big, I mean it's nowhere near the show building that Haunted Mansion or Pirates of the Caribbean or Indiana Jones has. It's a very, very small space compared to those, but they needed to pack a whole lot in for the Disneyland version of Buzz Lightyear. And now that they had this location, the Imagineering team went to work concepting the ride, eventually deciding to make it unlike anything guests had ever experienced. Now, many of the great Disney dark rides are built around what many people believe is the greatest ride system of all time, the Omnimover.
Wait, Omnimover? Freddy, that term sounds familiar, but can you maybe explain that concept a little more to us non-Disney technophiles?
Sure thing, Annie. The Omnimover system was created by Imagineers Roger Brogy and Burt Brundage as a way to continuously push guests through an attraction. It was inspired by WED's People Mover, but the key difference was the Omnimover could be swiveled in 360 degrees, allowing the Imagineers to point the audience in any direction that they needed them to be pointing to see the story progress.
Now, this technology is actually really important in the immersive storytelling process. It allows the storyteller, the Imagineers in this case, to have control over exactly what the rider is encountering at any given moment. It limits the potential distractions for the audience member and allows the rider to be fully engaged in the story, instead of catching a glimpse of a catwalk or emergency exit instead. Actually, speaking of the Omnimover, its first debut was in Tomorrowland as well, in the Adventure Through Inner Space attraction.
Good connection, pal. You can also see it in use today in the Doom buggies in the Haunted Mansion.
Ooh, a truly delightful example. That was a stretch, guys. I'm sorry. Of the Omnimover in action.
Delightful.
You're right. The ride vehicles in the Haunted Mansion are perfectly designed so you can't really see anything around you other than what the Imagineers want you to see. It also enhances that somewhat trapped feeling that the mansion gives its riders.
Great point, Annie. These Omnimovers are also a great way to produce an immensely efficient attraction. Once a rider is done with the ride, they exit onto a moving walkway, and their Omnimover circles back around and picks up a new collection of guests.
The perfect mix of efficiency and control.
The key ingredients to a great attraction experience.
True enough, but Imagineers decided to play with the idea of control when creating this new Buzz Lightyear attraction.
Oh, how so?
Well, they decided instead of the Omnimover controlling the guest's experience, the guest would control their own experience by being able to take control of the Omnimover.
Pure madness! Who would ever want to give up that kind of control?
It really was a gamble. It was also a nightmare logistically. I mean, the beauty of the Omnimover is that you only have to theme and decorate a specific sight line within an attraction. By making the guest in charge of the Omnimover's movements, all 360 degrees of the attraction need to be populated by story and action.
But they also need to give guests a reason to turn these vehicles around. After all, why go through all the work of theming in 360 degrees if someone doesn't have a reason to turn around? But with this came a story problem.
Oh yeah? What kind of story problem, Al?
Well, think about it, Annie. Our stories are linear that we usually tell. They operate in a controlled sequence, which again is why the Omnimover is so genius. Guests see the story in sequence, then move on to the next sequence, etc., etc.
Oh, okay, I think I get it. When you allow guests to look in any direction, they no longer have a story sequence and can lose the narrative as a result, right?
Bingo bango, give her a churro, folks. So Imagineers had to create a story that was told more experientially than linearly, kind of like Pirates. The story is going on all around you, and you have the choice which part of the story you choose to pick up during any given ride.
Gosh, I never really thought about how much thought goes into the subconscious details of an attraction like story sequence or lack thereof.
It really is astounding how much attention and intention goes into even the most seemingly simple attraction.
Oh, so true. Now, with the Imagineers being so determined to give guests the control on this new attraction, they had to find a weenie that would draw guests to turn their Omnimover around. And that weenie they created was Targets.
Targets? Like my favorite store, Target?
like the one and only. No, just targets, Annie. They would include blasters on the attractions that allowed guests to shoot at various Targets and Walmarts throughout the entire attraction. This would provide a great reason, or weenie, for guests to turn their vehicle in all 360 degrees.
Yeah, that's right. Imagineers had their ride concept and their weenie in place. Now all they needed was a great story. Imagineers were working with the Pixar story team, who at that moment were currently working on development of Toy Story 2, a film that would more heavily explore Buzz Lightyear's arch nemesis character, the evil Emperor Zurg. So Imagineers decided that riders would go head-to-head against Zurg and his dastardly cosmic capers. The next problem they would have to overcome, though, was how to get the audience involved.
What do you mean? It seems kind of obvious, doesn't it? We're battling Zurg, so we as riders all assume to be the character of Buzz Lightyear and battle him with our blasters and our charming wit.
That does seem like the obvious choice for sure, but Imagineers also had to no doubt be thinking about the problems presented by the original Snow White's Scary Adventure debacle.
Oh, yeah. You're talking about how WED Imagineers implied that the rider was Snow White, so they didn't put her in any part of the attraction, which led to massive confusion by riders when they didn't even see the star of the show.
Nailed it again, Andrea. And we actually cover that story in our Snow White episode if anybody wants to go back and give that a listen.
Imagineers wanted us to be the stars in the show, but there's only one Buzz Lightyear, so instead of us being Buzz, Imagineers decided that we were all members of Green Squadron of the Galactic Alliance, the mysterious megagroup that Buzz Lightyear is employed by.
Green Squadron? Wait, are you telling me it's implied that we're all the green aliens from the Pizza Planet scene in the first Toy Story film?
That's a great observation, Annie. That is indeed the case. With riders as the crew of aliens instead of Buzz himself, it gives them a unique story mission, a purpose, and it also gave them an opportunity.
An opportunity to meet their hero, Buzz Lightyear.
Buzz, yay! To infinity! Imagineers determined that the best way to do this would be to shrink the guests instead of growing Buzz. After all, there is actually something a little disturbing about a 6-foot-tall Buzz Lightyear. I've stood next to him in the character meet and greets, and it's not pretty. They would shrink audiences down once they walked into the queue building. They would do this by creating an illusion of shrinkery by surrounding guests with a bunch of oversized toys and game boxes and play sets throughout the indoor queue. As guests weaved their way through the queue, they would eventually meet the star of Star Command himself in the briefing room. Now, one of my favorite moments when I first walked into the queue at Buzz Lightyear's Astro Blasters was that moment you come around the corner and you see Buzz Lightyear there in the center in the briefing room, and he's got the giant Etch-a-Sketch in the background that is passing out his notes and sharing with us what we're going to experience on this adventure. And they had inside, his face wasn't an audio animatronic as sorts. He was certainly a moving animatronic character that pointed and gestured and turned towards the audience, but his face was a glowing projection from inside of his head. So his face is shaped like Buzz Lightyear, but there's a projection showing the animated lips and eyes and expressions of Buzz Lightyear. When I saw that, I was so intrigued and so excited because they were using, once again, an evolution of the projection mapping technologies that they had started way back with the Haunted Mansion in 1969. You guys know what I might be talking about, where they used a similar technology?
Tail of a serpent.
Yes.
Tail of a rat.
Madame Leota.
Yes.
Yeah, in 2 parts in that ride, the one you're talking about, Madame Leota, and in the grave scene where the busts are singing Grim Grinning Ghosts, we see a blank face with light and animation or film projected onto it, and we're able to see these faces seemingly come to life. In the graveyard with the busts, they're projecting their faces onto stone busts, or probably foam if we were to go over there and try and lift them up.
Yeah.
And Madame Leota, at the time, she was a static. Her crystal ball didn't move around, but they would project from behind into just a very, very small projector to show her face moving around. And that evolution showed up again with Buzz Lightyear as such a very cool look. Now, some people might today say, well, that doesn't look that great. I mean, if you look at it, you can kind of see where the registration is off maybe. But they continued to use that in a lot of different ways. Have any of you seen any? Have you guys seen any footage of the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train at Magic Kingdom in Walt Disney World?
I've ridden it.
You've ridden it?
Oh, gosh.
So
yeah,
I'd love
it's
to.
It's really amazing. The Seven Dwarfs, all of those characters, they're these wonderful animatronic characters. But how can you animate Grumpy's face if he was just an animated character? So instead, they're using the same rear projected technology to make his face appear to be moving as his original animated character. And then they did it again.
And for some reason, do they do this on a Frozen ride? I feel like they did this on Frozen Ever After.
And the Frozen ride in is it Frozen Ever After at the Norway?
I think that's what it's called in Epcot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, my maelstrom.
And that is even more believable and more realistic when you see it happening. The animation is happening on the face through projected views, and I think
it's amazing. I think it looks
incredible.
Really good, really, really good.
I have to say that as a student of Disney history as we are, I love when they don't update this technology on each given attraction, so then you can actually see the evolutionary steps, because inevitably when they perfect it with something like the Frozen Ever After projection mapping, they're going to eventually, during a refurbishment, they're probably going to use that technology to make Buzz look much better. But I almost prefer when they don't do that kind of stuff, so we can actually see what it once looked like, and then we can go experience it somewhere else in the park and see what it has turned into and what it inspired. But I mean, obviously, that's a pipe dream and not financially feasible. That's not a good idea. That's why I'm not the CEO of Disney. Keep it all as it is.
And it's so cool. You know, one of the funny elements of Disney parks or in film, where you have an actor who plays a character in the film. At the Disney parks or in toys or different things, somebody else has to come along and play those actors. So while you might think you're listening to Tim Allen speak as Buzz Lightyear in the queue, well, it probably would have cost them too much to have Tim Allen do that character again, or he didn't have those contracts. So they got one of my favorite voiceover artists who actually does such a great job of replicating character voices. His name's Corey Burton. I actually got to meet him one time, and He did his best Paul Frees in the Haunted Mansion for me live.
And
it
it's
was an
great.
amazing moment. Yeah, it's amazing.
From my understanding, I believe that Corey Burton's voice is actually in the entryway of the Haunted Mansion with the when it has updated queue information. Is that right?
Yeah, wherever they have to replace Paul Frees's voice in a Haunted Mansion, it's always going to be Corey that does it, and he does the voice whenever needed on the holiday version of Haunted Mansion.
One of the cool things is the first voice you hear in all of Disney is Corey Burton. Corey Burton is the voice on the trams. Hello and welcome to the Disneyland Resort.
Oh,
that
cool.
voice that you hear, that's just Corey Burton's like regular normal voice. The other thing that I think is really awesome is I actually, in my former career, I worked with a lot of students with autism, and Corey Burton has autism. And I think Corey Burton it's a super inspiring story for anybody who is living with autism to know that there is nothing holding you back. Corey Burton has made it to the top of the top when it comes to voice artists. And I am very, very inspired by Corey Burton's work and by all of the success that dude has had. And I would love to just talk to Corey Burton one day, because I know that just talking to him, I would close my eyes and just settle into a place of absolute comfort, because I've never met a person with a more soothing voice than Corey Burton. And I think it's also because he does a lot of work on my favorite audio drama, Adventures in Odyssey. He plays something like a record like 72 characters or something on that show. The dude is fantastic when it comes to his voice work. And I never, you don't really think about it when you're listening to Buzz in there, because the problem that I have is now they've created that section as like the fast pass or like the queue pass, what's the new thing, lightning lane, pass through. So you don't ever have a chance to stand in front of Buzz anymore, because that whole queue area is open. Yeah, so you don't really stand in front of Buzz. You just walk by him and you're like, hey, Buzz. Hey, Buzz.
Yeah.
And that's all you get.
It's a shame.
But when you get a chance, listener, I highly recommend that you go in and listen to the awesome, soothing voice of Corey Burton. Now, speaking of, once you leave this briefing experience with Buzz Lightyear, you load up into this Omnimover that we've talked so much about. The front shell closes on you, and you enter into the story as one of the elite members of Green Squadron.
Thanks for bringing that up, Al. I've always felt like Buzz Lightyear's Astro Blasters has just been an excuse to shoot a bunch of things with no real story or narrative to speak of.
Now, it is on its face, it seems to be a ride without a story. And honestly, they wouldn't really even need to put in any true narrative on this, and the ride would still be thrilling. But believe it or not, there's a narrative that shapes a guest's journey throughout this attraction. Now, hear me out when I tell this, because there's a lot of people who are going to be like, wait, whatever. But this is all very much in the ride. So when you first enter the attraction, we're essentially entering into the first stages of a child's, Andy in this instance, imaginative play. The room is mostly dark and formless, with the characters filling this room looking more like traditional toy robots and wind-up toys. Now, in the next room, the world of fantasy becomes less abstract and far more concrete. You find yourself in a fully realized space cruiser of Zurg's squadron. Here you also learn about the true conflict of the ride story. Zurg has stolen all the power cells for himself. These power cells are, of course, in the shape of AA batteries. Again, the melding of real life and Andy's imagination. Once you leave this show scene, you're then transported to Planet Z, where you can see Zurg flying off in the distance. It's now part of your mission to weave your way through an entire planet of foes in a desperate attempt to catch up with Zurg. As you make your way through the Zen surface, you see that Andy is in his final form, so to speak, of imagination. His play has gone from surface level to fully involved, to this point where he's created an entire planet filled with more realistic than toy-looking creatures. Once you blast your way across Planet Z, We finally catch up to Zurg yet again, but he's just out of our grasp. It isn't until we hit our own version of Buzz Lightspeed that we catch up to Zurg in the midst of a 1v1 battle with the one and only Buzz Lightyear of Star Command. It's all aliens on deck, shooting the targets in an attempt to help foil Zurg's ultimate plan of taking over the mysterious green planet. We then move into the finale sequence where Zurg meets his end, and I think this is so perfect because I've never noticed this until I started researching this episode. This scene is actually awesome because the gag really does go unnoticed. In this final scene, which is filled with menial targets, we see that the aliens have repackaged Zurg and are actually writing the word return on a receipt from Al's Toy Barn, the place that he was originally purchased from.
So, I love that ending. But let me get this straight. We could translate that this story is almost a Toy Story 1.5, where Zurg is purchased by Andy and gets played with, but wreaks so much havoc that Andy ultimately returns him?
You know, I actually do think that there's room in the narrative to make that fan theory, even if it's not specifically stated in any of the films.
Awesome. I mean, that's amazing. I'll never look at Buzz Lightyear's Astro Blasters the same again. And I wonder, here's a side note, I wonder if I never caught it because I was so busy trying to shoot all the targets that I never really looked at the story. But here, you know, I thought the attraction was just an excuse to shoot a bunch of things, which I loved. But who knew it told such a fun, zany story that also gave us a glimpse into the mind of an immensely imaginative child like Andy. I love it.
It's funny. I rewatched the attraction and on YouTube, and one of the little green men says, "We must return him."
Did you guys notice that before? Like the return?
I did.
In the years that I've ridden that, I never noticed it.
I remember it. Like, I remember it, but it never really clicked kind of the whole play out of like playing with Zurg and then actually sending him back. But I do remember him being in the box, and yeah. I wasn't paying attention. I was trying to get the highest score. I was so competitive.
Yeah. I definitely saw that the toys turned into reality sort of slowly as they went from, you know, wind-up toys to then this very real moment. And then seeing him put back in the box, I thought that was sort of the Twilight Zone ending, is that, you're a bad toy, go back in the box. I didn't see it as being returned to the store, which is just classic. And to think all of that is packed into an amazingly tiny space for attractions at Disneyland. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, you're right, Freddy. I never really thought about it, but we really only go through 4 fairly small show scenes in the attraction, don't we? Gosh, it seems so long and drawn out when it really only takes a few minutes or so to ride through at a normal speed.
Once again, the genius of Imagineers at play. The attraction itself takes up a tiny space in Tomorrowland, but since it crawls at a snail's pace, it seems massive. It's also amazing to think that if it crawled at the pace it did without the ability to shoot targets, this attraction would be so slow. We're moving so slow, but we always feel like it's going too fast for us.
Exactly.
We can't stop hitting that one. Which also makes me think that this is one of the only rides in the park that people get stoked for when it moves even slower.
Right.
I mean, it really is a marvel. It allows guests 5 minutes of fun in a space that would usually provide no more than a minute or two to get through if it was at a normal pace.
But we really haven't even talked about the best part at the end, you guys.
What part is that, Annie?
The scoreboard.
Ah, yes, the scoreboard.
There is nothing like riding Astro Blasters with your closest friends or siblings and absolutely annihilating them with your high score, which is what I often did. I know I have my secrets for racking up a fat stack of points, but I'm curious what your guys' techniques are.
Lots of aimless shooting. I just go all over the place. Do you guys have a technique? Because I've got a few tricks up my sleeve. Do you guys have your high score like in mind? Have you ever hit a high score to the point where it's on the board?
Not that I remember.
I don't think I've been on the board, but I know that I usually have a much higher score than my family that I'm at the park with. that I'm writing with.
Are you an Annie Oakley? Are you a crack shot?
A little bit. A little bit.
Oh my!
What I look
Lord,
for,
at
and I
this.
heard there are these hidden targets, and they're tiny, and there's like one or two, I think, in the center of Zurg. It's like Zurg's third eye or something. And there's some little diamond hidden targets behind Zurg or these other characters. And it's been a long time since I've ridden the ride, so I couldn't tell you exactly where they all are. But if you try and look for hidden things, yes,
it's actually not in the forehead. It's actually right under Zurg's little like circle plate on his chest.
That's it, but it's red, right?
Little hole. Well, it's just a hole. Like it's a dark,
it's just a hole.
Formless. Yeah, it's a formless and void hole right below his circle Z on his chest. And if you shoot that, you get 50,000 points right off. And so it's in room number 2 when Zurg is coming around and being like,
"No, stop that! This is mystery."
Which, sorry, can I back up and throw a little fun piece of trivia? So, we've been talking about the building of the Disneyland attraction. Now, it's important to remember that this was an iteration of what happened in Walt Disney World. So this had all been set up at Walt Disney World, and they put their own spin on it. Get it? Because it was called Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger Spin down in Florida. So I used a spin joke there. Nothing better than somebody who explains their jokes. But with that, one of the things that's really cool is you look and see that what year did Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger Spin open in Orlando? It was 1998. When did Toy Story 2 come out? 1999. So these folks were playing with this character of Zurg that they really had no clue what this character was going to look, or like they knew what he was going to look like, but they weren't quite sure what he was going to sound like. And so when you listened to that original voice soundtrack from the 1998 Space Ranger Spin down in Orlando, it sounded very different from what the final iteration in Toy Story 2 sounded like. We have the benefit of Disneyland of getting that taste when we first see him in Al's Toy Barn, and we get to use the final voice, which is Corey Burton. No, I'm kidding. That would be awesome. It was Corey Burton. He just voices the entire park now. So one of the things that I love, one of my secrets, and it's not a secret you can control, it's the secret of whenever you stop on the ride, find a diamond. Find a diamond or a triangle and just shoot the blazes out of that sucker. And you'll be racking up points left and right. So shooting the chest of Zurg, and then shooting at whenever you hear that voice be like, "Your spaceship has been temporarily halted," or whatever it says. That's when it's time to just unleash. Freddie, do you have any secrets?
Well, I learned at the fair and at Knott's Berry Farm that if you go and use the squirting gun, the squirt gun that goes into the clown's mouth that sends the balloon to popping. You remember that Midway game? I learned that the best thing to do is never look up to see if your balloon is filling up or if the racer is going faster. You keep your eye on that target and you will win every single time. And I use that same technique on Buzz Lightyear. Once I find a target that I'm happy with, and typically a diamond or a triangle, because I know those are higher points, I stay with it until I'm completely out of range. That way my points are multiplied. Doing some research, and I should really know this, should be better at this, but I believe the triangle's the highest. 10,000 points every time you hit a triangle.
Yeah, I think you're
and
correct.
5,000 for diamonds. Circles are the least. And squares are
don't
next.
waste time on the circles.
Don't waste your time on the circles unless it's the only thing in front of you. Also, I understand that every 5 times whether you're hitting a target or not, every 5 times you pull a trigger, you're gaining points. So don't stop firing.
Oh, really?
Even if you can't reach, you got to keep going 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Keep hitting 5s.
People who have horrible aim feel better about themselves.
Feel like they got something. So
Annie
whether
is
you're
throwing
catching it or
shade over here. She is just like straight up crack shot Annie. That's going to be your new nickname.
I'm pretty good at this game, not gonna lie.
That's
then
like the only thing I'm good at.
no.
In in the light speed tunnel, or whatever they call it in the Toy Story universe, in the light speed tunnel when you're speeding fast, you have to hit the ceiling tiles. There's hidden ceiling tiles.
Oh, I don't think I knew that. I know
Yeah.
there is like a diamond one in there too, but I never looked up. Oh, next time.
Watch for your diamonds and triangles.
Yep. Yep, that's the best way to do it. I have one great memory in Buzz Lightyear Astro Blasters. We had an experience where we didn't break down, but we had a guest who apparently was taking a very long time to get into their vehicle. And so I was just sitting in front of a group of diamonds and triangles. It's the only time that I've ever made it on the scoreboard. I got I think it was 1.2 million points. And
That's
I made
amazing.
I made it in the top 10 for maybe 3.5 minutes when a 7-year-old came and just obliterated me off the scoreboard. But it was a great experience. The other thing that I love go ahead.
Most people will win against me because I have more and more carpal tunnel syndrome in my right hand, which is my good aiming hand, and I can't aim with my left. I'm horrible at aiming with my left, so I get tired out pretty easy on.
You should
firing.
force the person you're riding with to use their hand as the trigger, and then you just aim their wrist all over the place.
Yeah,
I think
there
that's
we go.
fair. I think that's very fair. I'm a sucker for sending my photo to my email. I think that's just such a delightful little hilarious piece of Disney. How do I say this? It's very old-fashioned to be like, here, email this low-res photo of yourself so you can remember that you were staring at a target when it took your picture. You're always just
have
looking
the worst
oblivious.
face in those photos,
Exactly.
too. My
Annie, we know
mouth
why
is open
now.
and I'm just like.
Exactly. Annie's got one thing on her mind, and it's just destruction. She's like, must hit targets, must embarrass friends.
I'm so competitive. No one else cares. That's the thing. No one else cares. They're like, cool, good score.
And
I'm just
I love
secretly
that.
like,
I love that you're walking off and you're like, you don't understand. You don't understand. I've been in it. I've been in it deep for years, kid. If only you've seen what I've seen at Star Command. Oh my gosh. Y'all, Buzz Lightyear's Astro Blasters is a reminder of the creative minds that fought to create the juggernaut that would become Pixar. It's also a reminder of what a creative mind can do with a little bit of space and a whole lot of imagination. Though the Omnimovers roll at a snail's pace, the incredible storytelling and innovative spin on a classic ride design have surprised and delighted guests for decades, and they will hopefully do so to infinity and beyond.
And that's the story of Buzz Lightyear's Astro Blasters. If you enjoyed this episode, my name is Freddy Martin. If you didn't enjoy it, my name is Alex Stewart. You should actually help us out by giving us a fantastic review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or anywhere else you're listening to us today. Give us a review. It really helps to have other people find the show and grow the Backside of Water community.
You can also find us on the socials by searching for the Backside of Water podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and now Threads as well.
Yeah. That one we don't really do much with because I'm such a troglodyte. I'm like, Threads? What is all this? It was just like when I was on Twitter, when we tried to do the Twitter stuff, which is now X.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. I don't know if that's going to last for the future generations. I don't know if it's going to continue to stay X.
Yeah.
But I have no idea what I'm doing over there. So yeah, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook. You can also find Freddy and Annie over on the socials by following them at Annie. What is your handle?
It's ANNIE, Annie, and then my last name RUYGT, Ruygt.
Which is just such a.
I know I should change it. It's the
I'll
worst.
never get past Ruygt. No, it's not. It's not the worst. It's something that I'll never forget how to spell it because it's just so bonkers.
No one says it correctly, but you know who did? Cole.
Cole said your
it
name
correctly.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you,
y'all. Cole, can we shout out Cole right now?
We sure can.
So we got a message a little bit ago, just a few days ago, that we have a young fan.
His name is Cole. He's a fan of The Backside of Water and the Smuggler's Dispatch podcast, our counterpart podcast based off of Star Wars. And he was so inspired by listening to our antics that he decided to create his own podcast. It is, I want to say that this is called the Galactic News Podcast.
Yes.
And it's hosted by Cole and his mom. And it is precious. It is amazing.
It's charming.
Cole,
It's smart. He knows what he's doing. He gets podcasting because he listens to it, and you can really tell. And so we're just thrilled that he name dropped us in his first episode.
Yeah, thank you,
and you know
Cole.
what I would prefer? Rewinding. When we were talking about plugging our podcast with good reviews. Instead, if you were going to review our episode, and even if you weren't going to review this episode or our podcast, instead, can you go over and give a 5-star review to Galactic News?
Yes.
Hosted by Cole.
Yes, do that.
I think it might only be on
Instead of us.
Spotify. Is it only
Is
on
it only
Spotify?
on Spotify?
I know that's where we listen to
might.
it. So if
Oh
you
no,
don't...
I listened to it on
Yeah.
Apple Podcasts.
Oh,
I got it on
perfect.
it. Yeah.
Perfect.
So it's
All
on
right.
there too. It's got some great artwork.
Yeah,
It's-
killer
it's-
artwork.
And he's flying on the Sea Wing, which is the Cole Wing, which is awesome and clever and creative. So go listen to him over there. Well done, Cole. Thank you for being a devoted backsider. I don't know what are fans of the
BSOW or
Yeah.
a
Besouder.
Besouder.
And I think that it's also important for us to talk about something that we've got cooking up. Annie has also released a T-shirt that we designed. No, that's a stupid thing.
Yeah, we
that
did.
Means that I had something to do with it. No, Annie, you designed this shirt. You did
No.
all the work. I
Al,
said,
you told
hey,
me.
can we do something? Yeah, I was like, can we do a variation on the WED Enterprises logo? And you were like, here, how about this? And I was like, oh my gosh, it's beautiful. It was just like perfection. It was perfection. And you're selling that on your website, is that right?
I have it on the website. Yeah, for anybody who wants a copy of a T-shirt.
You can
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
printing.
you can
And
send somebody an 8.5 by 11.
it comes in a couple different colors, or I think a few different colors, and a bunch of different sizes, and just made it for fun so we could all sport the BSOW gear. So
I
if
got
you'd
mine,
like one,
and
yeah,
it's a
have some
great
fun.
quality shirt. Mm-hmm. So what's your website, Andrea?
It is Annie Ruygt illustration.com. So again, ANNIE RUYGT illustration.com.
And I'll actually put that into the show description. So if you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts right now, you can just open our description. You can click on the link to Annie's website, and it will take you directly to that page. I'm also going to be linking Cole's podcast down there too. So
Yes.
if you are feeling like you just don't want to use that many fingers, you can just tap instead of searching, and you'll be able to find it. And please, y'all, rep those shirts because they are sick. If you are a fan of Disney history, this is the perfect throwback IMHO, in my humble opinion. Emo.
Just a quick correction. I apologize. Apple Podcast does not currently have the Galactic News. The one that's on Apple Podcast that's called Galactic News is not Cole. So you got to go on Spotify.
It is Spotify. Okay.
Thieves.
Spotify.
Thieves. Yep. So just go to Spotify. So you'll have that link down there. Freddie, where can we find you?
You can find me on Instagram
release.
and Twitter at Skipper Freddy. That's me. Work release. And this episode, in 5 years, this won't matter to you if you're just hearing this right now, but my website totally went down, and so freddymartin.net is not available at the moment. I've got to rebuild it. We can rebuild her. We can bring all of the articles and special stories and devotions and all these wonderful literature back, but it's all still somewhere. I just got to get it back up. So in the next couple months, FreddyMartin.net will be back up. If you get there and you just see a spinning ball, just say, I'm sorry, Freddy, and then come back later.
I love that you go to like the grave site of FreddyMartin.net and pay your respects.
Pay your respects.
You go back to
drop flowers at FreddyMartin.net.
Digital flowers. Oh, that's amazing. And I mean, as far as I go, I just do the backside of water Instagram and Facebook. There are some people who try to find and friend me and follow me on my personal account. Y'all, the reason why I don't accept your request for follow on my personal Instagram account is because I haven't posted on there in over 4 years. And for those who are following me, you'll notice if you go to my page, I actually posted the same picture back to back, and they were both anniversary shout-outs to my wife, and she was like, Al, that's embarrassing.
Yeah.
Do not just do this for anniversaries. And I was like, I don't understand the social media. And so you can just see what we're doing on Instagram and Threads and Facebook and X. So with that, Freddy, lead us out of this thing.
Well, until next time, as you exit... Oh no!
Wait.
Oh no!
Guys, red alert. Oh, red alert, they're coming.
They're coming! They weren't supposed to be back until next week!
Well, they must be back early then. Quick, get in your positions, guys.
Oh, I don't like confrontations.
Now calm down. All right, on the count of 3, everybody drop.
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
It's great to be back at the studio after the long trip back from Tokyo Disney Sea. Al, I can't wait to record the Buzz Lightyear Astro Blasters episode.
Ooh, same here, Freddy. Oh, look at this.
What the heck are these, Al?
You know, this is actually something that Thurl over at Imaginarium R&D has been working on. Look at this. They're action figures of you, myself, and Annie.
Those are so cool. I've always wanted an action figure of myself. Oh, and how I miss Annie being on our show. I can't wait till she's back from maternity leave.
I couldn't agree more. Her voice is so missed on the show. I have to say, though, it's kind of strange that we came in here and found these toys just sitting in our seats.
A little odd, to be sure. Oh, hey, the system is currently recording. That's pretty odd in itself.
Yeah, someone must have hit the record button when cleaning up the studio. Oh well, turn it off and let's start a new track for our new episode about my boy Buzz.
Ho, you've got it, boyo. Still kind of weirds me out about these toys sitting here in our seats, but oh well. Turning off now.